Very sad state of affairs. We have 3 sitters, 3 comrades who are allegedly going to fix a problem created by other comrades. The ANC refuses to learn. I am very disappointed in Bhuti Manamela. He's supposed to be a voice of reason. He's fresh, he's new in the executive, but has always been there as a bridesmaid, you know. And now we are getting the names that are going to run the cities. These names are old names. These are people who we are told are ANC fixers. These are the people who raise money for the ANC. It will be really, I don't know. It sounds like this is another attempt, like they did in Johannesburg when they stabbed all the hospital boards with ANC Youth League leaders, not to deliver, to do service delivery, but to make sure that they interfere with the tenders and channel money elsewhere other than where it's supposed to be. The sitters have been a disappointment. It seems to me that by design, they were designed to redirect public funds, worst of it all, money that comes from private businesses, into private hands, and we as a society receive absolutely no value for money. I mean, the young people without the relevant skills required by our market in this country alone is huge. And we have all these sitters that are just not delivering. It's a bit of a situation where when the ANC loses the local government elections next year, and then we say, but we told you so. These guys are unforgiving in terms of their desire to wreck and destroy public institutions. It's just something that you cannot explain. Like I have children that I have to explain certain things to them. I can't explain the behavior of ANC administration over and over again, doing exactly the same old thing that has not worked, and it's got nothing to do with the people. It's got to do with the party that is looking inwardly. Yeah. And that is our problem today.
And how do we rectify something that we've continuously seen happening? Donovan, you spoke about the fact that we are losing trust in those public institutions. So what needs to be done differently?
Look, firstly, one of the questions with the theatres itself, because it's a sector training authority. So it trains within a particular sector. It utilizes skills levies, that every person working in there's a levy, and that money comes to the theatre, and they're supposed to upskill the persons working in there, not necessarily you get job creation by them upskilling somebody who goes to another position, and then that creates more vacant positions. So you can say in the construction theatre, people who are just doing mortar labor jobs get skills in clerical matters or even technical skills and so forth. Has it actually been able to do that? And trade unions and owners and companies, private business, need to be asking questions. What are they applying for in upscaling? Because trade unions themselves sit on these boards. Trade unions themselves are involved in these sectors, as well as owners. But that's besides the point. What has happened in this case, now twice in a very short period of time, you're asking yourself, these boards, and there are many boards, and this is what people are asking, are these boards effective in any way, not just in a theatre? Are these boards, be it hospital boards, be it whichever boards they are they actually necessary? And then maybe all of these were created because you had not just government, but you wanted to create oversight from the broad public. But the broad public is anyone who's not in government. So the question becomes, has that become a place for either patronage or, for that matter, these recycling of names that we are looking at? And yes, it is true that when you have persons with levels of support in a democracy like ours, our post-colonial democracy, if they are not in an effective position, in a functional position, there is space for mischief making. Yeah. And so therefore you have to balance that, and political instability and so forth. But we have gone past that now. Yeah. And I think all political parties, not just the ANC, have to start recognizing that people are playing the same game they are playing because there's a lack of confidence in them, in all the institutions, and in each other. Times gone by, we would be in a good mood if our national team won. Those times are no more.
Yeah, no, but certainly a conversation needed on the broader significance of Broads, definitely. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, of course, the recent developments when it comes to the tourism SA board as well. But to this now, which is also, top of the stories this week, was the SAPS Commissioner Mkhwanazi corruption claims. Of course, we know that the ad hoc committee in Parliament has finally set its terms of reference to investigate the SAPS Commissioner's explosive claims on those issues of corruption as well as political interference. Professor, I'm going to bring you into this with the first question. What does this probe tell us about the state of policing and accountability, perhaps, in South Africa?
Yes, indeed. That's a million-dollar question, and answers to which will come after the committee or this special committee has looked into the matter, ventilated on the issues, and then tables a report. But at the outset, I would say that the allegations on their own basically tell you that there is a lot to be desired in this case, because you have a police force that is supposed to protect communities, and then you get reports that there are people who get victimized by the same people who are supposed to protect them. Then you ask yourself, what kind of a state is this? Then you then have the IPID, which is supposed to look into the behavior and practices of the police. If then there is wrongdoing in IPID, what are we left with? And then obviously then we have government that is supposed to be overseeing everything that happens, more especially the legislative arm of government, which also has a responsibility to oversee what happens with the executive. And then if you find that within the legislature, there are people who are more aligned to their political parties than to government, then we have a problem. You saw this happening, for example, with the Palapala matter, where government was supposed to hold the executive to account. What did you get? They said, even when the president was resigning, they said, no, don't worry, chief. We have the numbers, we are going to protect you. Then you ask yourself, where is this country going? So SAPS is just one area, and we'll just wait and see what the outcome will be. I'm optimistic, at least, with this parliamentary committee, by virtue of the fact that we have different political parties participating. But on the other hand, I have reservations because you have this coalition government, which they decided to call a GNU. And there are people who are basically singing for their lunch. Instead of them being objective and then holding those who are in power accountable, they are in fact accomplices to the crime. So it's a 50-50, I would say, as much as I give them something benefit of the doubt, but then let's just wait and see, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, certainly. And I'm very curious as well to hear the remarks from our other guests in regards to this conversation. But when we return, we continue with the conversation on the week's top stories. And of course, don't forget to be part of the conversation by calling in and sending us WhatsApp on the numbers that are appearing on screen. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to Newsfeed. We've been asking for your opinion as well as just some of the top stories that stood out for you during this week. And we've gotten a few WhatsApps in response, and coming from Sibaku saying, good evening. The story that stood out for me is the appointment of the 3 administrators by the Minister of Department of Higher Education and Training, Buti Manamela. Of course, that conversation we just had, which have brought much I believe recruitment processes into question of how was the process done, or it's recruited as the same people there. That's what I'm getting there. Of course, and then other WhatsApp that we've also gotten there says, good evening. The story that stood out for me was one of SETA appointments. I'm very disappointed on the new Minister Buti. That's coming from Tembi there, speaking about that conversation that we just spoken about. But the reality is, even when it came to the situation regarding SETA, it went through a parliamentary process. Just before the break, we were speaking about the terms of reference for the ad hoc committee into the KZN Police Commissioner's claims. And the reality is, some are saying that these commissions, these parliamentary processes, do we expect real accountability here, or will it just be another tick on the box?
You see, this is the challenge. One of the good things that have come out over the time is that Parliament has to bare its teeth Otherwise, people would get upset, and correctly so. Because Parliament is supposed to be a check on the executive, the executive, which is the ministers, deputy ministers, although deputy ministers are not necessarily parts of cabinet, and the president. But if Parliament doesn't do it properly, now that there's not a single party who has the majority in Parliament, it means they can be it. They can do it. But do they do it because they really want to do a check on power and they want to create a proper process, or do they do it for the theatre? The theatre, the ceremony of acting like you're doing you. So in other words, you're not necessarily ticking a box, but you're ticking a different box. You're trying to become popular through the process as a party. And one of the difficulties we have in our democracy is political party dominated, not people dominated. So as much as people vote, because they're voting for parties, as a parliamentarian, your accountability is hard, although the Constitution and so forth, when you swear the oath, is to the people. But you know your job is only guaranteed by the party. So you have greater accountability to the party. So in these ad hoc hearings and so forth that's going to take place, we would like to see Parliament not doing it for the theatre, to grow their political party, but to really ask difficult questions, probe it, but also to get progress. Because we need progress. It's no use saying this person's a failure, that person's a failure, this is a failure, then we're all failures. Because we're getting into a rut, simply put. We're getting into a rut, and we're like a bakkie in mud. The more you're going to spin the wheel, it may create nice theatre, but the more stuck you're going to get. And that has got to change. So even on Mkhwanazi, for that matter, we would hope they probe him, the allegations, and the former minister who's on leave. They go through the whole thing. They don't just do it because they want to blame somebody, because that's the easiest thing to do. We need correction. We need remedies.
And Bekisisa, I'd like to ask you this question. We know that there needs to be a probing, as Donovan mentioned, of Mkhwanazi, of the minister who's been placed on special leave, Senzo Mchunu. There was also a call by the MK party to bring in former police minister Bheki Cele. But say these allegations are found to be true, what then happens to our policing and judicial system? I mean, these are explosive allegations, but the reality is what needs to be done once these conversations are had and these probes are done?
Well, we've been calling for reforms of our state institutions for quite a long time. One commission after the other. The Marikana Commission, for instance, recommended a whole host of reforms for public policing in this country. That report was shelved. Nothing happened. We learned no lessons from it because as a country, the political establishment refuses to learn. The ANC refuses to learn. The ANC has lost contact with the people. It is no longer representing the people. It's representing itself and for its own survival. My earnest wish is that the parliamentary process must actually bite. One, it would be interesting to see who adopts the final report because of the coalition arrangements. Yeah. If the report is adopted by the majority, which would include the ANC, and it's a report that calls for certain heads to roll, it will be interesting for me to see who else was part of that decision-making. The chairperson of the parliamentary committee is a gentleman I know personally, and I have high hopes, and I think that he was chosen by a multi-party committee to run this because they know his integrity. So we are pinning our hopes on our parliamentarians, who are no longer just the majority party, to come to the party and to hold everybody in the value chain of the Southern Police Services accountable. The idea of bringing in a former minister, Bheki Cele, almost a certainty, because he also knows certain people who are rumored to be holding people in the SAPS and giving them brown envelopes. He admitted to knowing one of them. And so, yes, he has to come. But what we really want is action after the report has been adopted. Yeah. I think that is what South Africa wants.
All right, let's move on to another big story that happened this week. And of course, this is regarding the South African National Defence Force General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. They're speaking, and his remarks, we'd also gotten a statement earlier from the SANDF who spoke about the fact that they've noted with concern some of the allegations published suggesting that the general is defiant towards the Minister of Defence, that being Angie Motshekga, saying that these allegations are incorrect and misleading. But Professor, I'd have to speak to you first in regards to this matter and ask you, regarding the general's comments in Iran, they've been labelled as ill-advised by the presidency, raising questions about misalignment between defence diplomacy and foreign policy. How damaging, of course, is this for South Africa's international standing?
Yeah, indeed, it's damaging because ordinarily you have South Africa being a unitary state. That is what was agreed upon, and that is what is enshrined in the Constitution. Even if you were coming from a province being sent abroad by a premier of the province, you will still be representing South Africa. So in this case, there are a couple of questions that remain unanswered. First of all, the question would be, was the general's trip sanctioned by the minister? Secondly, was the trip okayed by the president? Thirdly, is South Africa's foreign policy shared by all and within the different sectors of government? If the answer then to that is in the affirmative, then it means the general would be solely responsible for whatever happened. But then if the answer is in the negative, then we have an even more serious problem, because it means that we have a foreign policy agenda which is not shared by different departments and which is also not shared by different sectors of government. Then that will be another problem. So in this case, I would say that without having all the facts on the table, it's very difficult to say affirmatively that the general is wrong, because we don't know what discussions happened before he left the country in the first instance, and then what briefing did he have. My understanding is that for any senior leader of a country to visit another country, you need a briefing. And that briefing involves people from different sections. There will be a political briefing, there will be an economic briefing, so there will be different briefings that you receive as a package. So that when you go to a particular country, you go there with a full understanding. One, what is South Africa's foreign relations with that particular country? In other words, a foreign policy agenda of South Africa to that country. And then secondly, what can you say and what can you not say when you go there? So all of these are questions we don't have answers to, because we're not privy to the discussions that happened behind the scenes. Once we get those answers, then we will be in a better position to say whether the general is solely responsible for what happened, or if in fact he's just part of the group.
Yeah, we're certainly not privy, but I'd have to ask all three of you gentlemen, when our military chief openly aligns with Iran, what kind of a signal does that send to ordinary South Africans, specifically about where our government's loyalties lie on a global stage? I'll start with you, Donovan.
Look, simply put, South Africa's relationship with Iran post-94 is a long, deep-standing relationship. Politically, they have cooperated on the basis of South Africa's understanding of its role in the world as a country that is non-aligned, as a government and a country that's non-aligned. And it has done that consistently. So it's not pro-Western, it's not pro-East, etc. And it has supported Iran in its efforts to have nuclear energy for peaceful matters. It has done that under President Mandela, Mbeki, and it continued. The only time it wavered slightly was with President Zuma, where he agreed with President Obama from the United States and assisted, and that's what happened with the sanctions, and the deal was created in the last part of Obama's second term. The problem is this, though. It is not necessarily politically what the general said, but the general is not supposed to speak on politics. He's a general, he's the head of the National Defence Force. And that is the issue. It's, if anybody visits outside the country, yes, they align themselves, but you have roles that you don't extend your role into some other matter. And it is correct that the president is supposed to meet with him, but I think the president should have asked the minister to ask the general, why is he fit to be in this position when he goes out of the country and he speaks like he's a minister or a president? This is the issue. The president removed the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry for going, that was the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry, for going outside the country without permission. But let's say even if he went with permission, but if he went within permission and then spoke about things outside of his mandate as a Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and spoke about genocide or whatever in South Africa, then the president would have said, are you fit to hold this office? We've had the occasion where, this is a few years back, where the then President Mbeki removed Vusi Pikoli on the basis that when he asked for 2 weeks before Jackie Selebi should be removed as a police commissioner, Vusi Pikoli, as the head of the NPA, refused. And then President Mbeki said, you do not understand your role as the head of the NPA. You are not fit to hold this office. I am removing you. Similarly, I think the defense chief should be asked, does he understand his role? Why should he is he fit to run as the defense chief? Because his actions in Iran, it's not the content, may be that he doesn't understand his role.
Yeah, and Bekisisa, I want your opinion in this. Weigh in on this. Does he understand his role?
I didn't even know the guy's name. That's how irrelevant he is in the bigger scheme of things. But I agree with Donovan. The guy has exceeded the scope of his powers. He has embarrassed this country, has embarrassed this government. What he said belongs to the mouth of a minister, a mouth of the president. There is DECO that manages our international relations on behalf of the president. And those are our representatives. If they err on the side of caution, because that's their job. Now, this comes at a wrong time, when we are trying to reset relations with the United States of America, run by someone who is obviously unstable. And this is going to play into the hands of the lobby, the Afrikaner lobby group, and all other people who seem to regard America as their second home suddenly. Everyone goes to the White House to badmouth our country and to make relations with the United States of America even more complicated. Now we've just had our own general adding fuel to the fire. And I think he is already on his way to retirement. He should be allowed to go early. I don't think we'll lose much. We've paid so many other incompetent people before a lot of money to retire from the public service. We should pay him, we thank him for his service, and he must live in peace. And there's no other way. The minister seems to say that everything is really okay. They got permission to travel. That's beside the point. The point is that he said the things that don't belong to his mouth. He exceeded the power of his power and the scope of his duties. Therefore, he must be asked why he should retain his office, because it's not fit and proper.
Yep. All right. Well, when we return from the break, we continue with our conversation. Another important story of the week, and that is, of course, the dissolution of the Tourism Board, a move that has been widely criticized. Well, a very good evening. You've just joined us. We are, of course, touching on the top stories of this week, and this includes Minister Patricia de Lille dissolving the SA Tourism Board. The minister says the board has been dissolved due to governance failures and irregularities. Gentlemen, the first question I'd have to ask is this move a cleanup, or does it expose a deeper structural weakness in how state-owned entities have been run? We had this conversation before. Prof?
First of all, says Veronica, let us distinguish between two things. One, if I'm in a position of power, there are certain decisions I will take because I have to. In other words, did she act because she had to, or did she decide to act that way? And then, having answered that question, did she take a unilateral decision, or did she act on the advice of those who are supposed to advise her? If the latter is the case, then it means we have even a bigger problem, because it's not just the minister who is in the wrong, but also those who are advising her. Under normal circumstances, before you take a decision to fire a board or to hire a board, you must consult extensively. And in the main, you would identify people who have the required skills and knowledge to assist you, not just to bring any Tom, Dick, and Harry. You bring people who are knowledgeable so that when you take a decision, it's an informed decision and will not be found wanting if you are supposed to appear before the parliamentary committee. So in this case, I think that there are certain things that went wrong. The first question, of course, will be, was it necessary to fire the board? Then the minister will answer that question and tell you the reasons why she felt it was necessary to do so. Because you don't change a formula that works. If the board was working well, why would you fire it? Then it means that the decision she took to fire the board, then she will argue and say, I had enough evidence to prove that the board was not performing the duties as was expected of them. In which case, then, you can make your own assessment as to whether the reasons she puts forth are in fact valid and can be sustained. If then, of course, she took a decision hurriedly, then she has herself to blame.
And Bekisisa, to you, we've known the minister to be somewhat of a no-nonsense minister. Do you see her move as accountability or just another revolving door of leadership instability?
Well, this is not a Patricia de Lille problem. The problem we're facing in this country is a serious lack of leadership. Now, we had the previous board at South African Tourism. They decided to have meetings any other day so that they could claim for board fees. And they finished their budget in 6 months before the year was up. She had to dissolve that board. We have a second board that comes in and they decide that they actually don't like the CEO. And when they are being asked nicely to explain this and expand on it, they end up being resigning. Now, once the board doesn't have a chairperson and a deputy chairperson, it cannot convene. It's the minister who must convene a board that is no longer having the power to do so, so that a new chairperson is appointed and a board becomes functional. Now, a board that lacked legal authority, they acted beyond the scope of their powers and suspended the chief executive office. I do not know this chief executive office. I have not seen any extraordinary results coming out of the South African tourism since she took over as a full-time CEO. But that is beside the point. The point is that Minister de Lille will never be fooled. And I think she is right to act with speed, because that's what in this country lacks. You know, if people are misunderstanding their powers, get them on the street.
Get them out.
Don't wait until the organization is on the floor. No, get the board on the street and hire new people. I think she's done that twice now, 3 times now, actually. And that's just a marker of what the problem as a country we're facing. It's beyond just the issue of what is happening in tourism. We discussed the issue of what is happening in the theaters. So we are in bigger trouble than we thought.
All right. And Donovan, as we wrap, your opinion on your weighing on this matter?
I still don't know what the board does. I don't know who are the members of the board. I don't know if there's a board there, if it will help or not. I think, well and done, 3 times already. Somebody must please tell me, why is this board necessary? You have Proudly South Africa, you have Brand South Africa, you have SA Tourism. Suppose tourism is a wonderful sector. It's a sector that can create jobs. Our country is beautiful and so forth. Why do we need a board? I think the board members who are contesting Minister de Lille, I'd like them to tell us why a board is necessary more than anything else, because I don't know. And as I said, I don't know who's the members of the board, so maybe they can introduce themselves in that way and tell us why there should be a board and how it helps tourism. I can't see it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your opinion, gentlemen, and having this discussion with us as we discussed, of course, the top stories this week. A lot to think about and dissect as South Africans as we look ahead for this week. And that, of course, was Professor Bheki Mngomezulu, as well as Donovan Williams and Bekisisa Ncube adding to the conversation there. When we return, of course, we take a look at your latest headlines.